Alberto, saludos.
Bien, un gusto verte, un gusto verte.
Hola, hola, Robert. Igualmente.
Creo que se escucha perfectamente. Creo que Regine está en Addis. Ah, hallo Regine, wie geht es dir?
Mm, Hola,
Ok,
Regine.
practico un poco mi alemán con Regina.
Bueno,
Eh,
yo voy a apagar mi cámara, yo soy reportera, no necesito tener
bueno, gracias Mónica
Claro que sí,
cámara
Mónica. Si no tiene la
por
cámara
siempre
encendida, no
ayudar.
puede reportar.
Y nos falta Kerian y nos falta Wolfgang. No sé si Wolfgang está en. Do we know if Wolfgang is in Addis or he's remote? Regina, do you know that? Okay, great. Okay, we still have some, like 3 minutes. Okay, yeah. Roberto, did you get the final version of the script? Yeah, with the colors and all that. So you have an important role.
Roberto. Okay.
Hallo, Wolfgang, wie geht es dir? Thank you for being with us. I know how the IGF in person is running from one session to the other. Thank you very much for joining us. I know you're a star in all the IGFs and you're very always required. So thank you very much for having the time to join our session today. So we're waiting for Carrie-Anne. She said that she would join. We have Lina. Lina, how are you? Where are you, Lina? Are you in Strasbourg as well?
Hello, hello.
Oh,
I am in Estonia.
oh, you're in
I'm in.
Estonia. Fantastic. Oh, yeah, kind of everywhere. Oh, we have audience in the room. That's great. Thank you, all of you, for joining.
So we only are waiting for Carrie Ann, right?
Yes, but if we are if the time is to start, we can start, and then she should join. It's quite enough. Not that early in the United States, but it's the morning here. It's 11:20 in Buenos Aires. So there must be 9:30, 9:20 in the morning.
Okay.
Not very early.
Okay, let me announce to the colleagues that we will start in maybe 2 minutes.
Okay,
It's okay, right?
2 minutes. It's 2 minutes. Thank you, Robert.
See you.
Gehört, der Tobias Bacherle ist nun doch noch gekommen.
Ja.
Heute früh.
Nein, früher.
Ja,
Ich
ja.
habe ihn schon gesehen.
Okay, ja.
Ja, er hat morgen, glaube ich, einige Parlamentarier.
I lost audio from the room.
Yeah, don't worry. I just turn it off.
Okay. No, just checking. The meeting yesterday went well, Robert, right? The regional
Yes,
one. I liked it. I enjoyed it.
definitely. It was really good. Thank you very much.
Thanks to you for your leadership. Yes. Um,
and it's organized by the government of Argentina, along with some other important institutions. We have our esteemed colleague Olga Cavalli. He's in Argentina, and we will be co-moderating this fantastic session. So I would like to give the floor to Olga so she can introduce. So she can introduce our great panelists.
Are we ready, Roberto?
Over to you, Olga. Yes, actually, we are already starting the session, and I'm giving you the floor now, so you can introduce.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Roberto. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from Buenos Aires, Argentina. It's the morning here of a quite summer day, quite hot. My name is Olga Cavalli. I am the National Director of Cybersecurity of Argentina and the Academic Director of the South School of Internet Governance. Many thanks to all of you for being with us in person or virtually today in this open forum focused on enhancing cybersecurity of the national administration, but we have a group of very experienced and distinguished panelists and friends who will share with us some comments about how to enhance cybersecurity and tackle cybercrime. With me there are our distinguished panelists. I will briefly present them and then give the floor to them. Many thanks to all of you. I know you're very busy. Some of you are in Paris and some of us are virtually. Mr. Wolfgang, a good friend of the School of Internet Governance, and myself, Professor Emeritus at the University of Aarhus in Germany. Regine Grimberger, she's Ambassador of Cyber Foreign Policy of Germany. Welcome, Regina. Lina Allen, she is in Estonia. She is the Regional Program Lead at EU CyberNet. Welcome, Lina. Cesar Molinesi, Director of Cybersecurity, E-commerce and Digital Signature at Neurotel in República Dominicana. But he's also the Regional Program Lead at
Latin America.
Very important role for us Latin Americanos. And Carrie Ann Barrett, my dear friend from Cybersecurity Program Manager in the Organization of American States. We have our dear friend Roberto Zambrana as our on-site moderator. He's a member and a very distinguished member of the Internet governance ecosystem in Latin America and in his country, Bolivia. And our dear rapporteur, Monica Proches from Colombia. She's always helping all the activities that we organize. Thank you very much, Monica, for being with us. And over to you, Roberto, my dear co-moderator, for giving us some initial comments.
In the different aspects that are part of the strategies that actually fight and try to prevent different kind of attacks and other means of affecting actions that can be damaging for our institutions, particularly in the public sector, but in different other aspects. So maybe we can start with you, Olga, and our first guest.
Thank you very much, Roberto, for your initial comments. And before giving the floor to our colleagues, let me tell you very, very briefly what has been done in Argentina to enhance the cybersecurity, especially at the national administration, but being the government and the national administration, one of the most important users of the IT infrastructure and data, that it said perhaps an interesting information for you to have in mind. We have a national cybersecurity strategy that it's being revised right now. We have a national cybersecurity committee, which involves several ministries, and the National Cybersecurity Directorate that I lead in the Secretary of Public Innovation. We issued a policy called Minimum Information Security Requirements for organizations of the national public sector, because and this policy establishes a series of minimum information security requirements which are mandatory for this ministries or parts of the national administration, and they're the main receivers and producers of information of the country. So this is kind of the basis for establishing security at the national level. So we think that it's important. We are working on the different organizations to make that happen. And it's revised by the National Directorate. There is a big challenge, especially for developing countries, in different aspects related with cybersecurity. How to be up to date with technology. Technology is usually acquired from other countries. It depends on the budget availability. And sometimes when everything is well done with security, nothing happens. So it's difficult to show progress when all the things are in place and are working well. At the same time, it's difficult to train staff. There are not many universities and qualified training courses that are training people, especially at the national administration. How we can create new careers in cybersecurity with universities, and how can we deal with the human resources of human resources. What is happening in Latin America is many of our very good human resources are going to work to develop countries. So that's also something that we have to face as a big challenge. So having said this general questions and comments and things to think about, I will ask one question to my dear friend Wolfgang, and we all know that Wolfgang is very well recognized for all the work that he does, but especially every year we wait for his comments about predictions for the next year about internet governance, cybersecurity, and all that will happen in internet, especially in this international interaction. So Wolfgang, my question to you is, considering cybersecurity as an important part of internet governance, and I know that you're focusing more now on your work in cybersecurity, can you share with us your comments about what we can expect from and about cybersecurity and cyber threats in the next year that it's coming, 2023? And welcome, and thank you very much for being with us this morning for us, afternoon for you.
Thank you, Olga. And thank you very much for making this arrangement. I just came from a session which had the title, The Role of Governments in Internet Governance. And we referred to the definition of internet governance from the Tunis Agenda, which introduced the multi-stakeholder model, and where the civil society, the private sector, and governments are singled out as the main stakeholders, and each stakeholder should contribute, and this was the key words, in their respective roles. And the conclusion from this addition in their respective roles is that there is no single model for the governance of the cyberspace, because it depends from the issue. So that means if it comes to cybersecurity, the governance model will be certainly different when it comes to the management of the domain name system. In the domain name system, governments are in an advisory capacity because all the work is done by technical experts and by the registries, registrars, and wherever I can. And Olga was in many various capacities on the non-state side and in the governmental advisory committee there, and is very aware about it. Cybersecurity, it's very clear. Here, the governments have a priority because national security and also fight against cybercrime, you know, this is primarily a task for the governments. But, however, it would make absolutely sense, and it's not would not only make sense, but it is needed that governments consult with non-state actors if they really want to enhance the cybersecurity, like in the domain name system. The voice of governments is needed. That's why, you know, you have a governmental advisory committee. Insofar for cybersecurity, it makes absolutely sense to have probably a non-state actor advisory committee which would give advice from the technical perspective, from the private sector, from the civil society, you know, what governments should do. You mentioned the national cyber strategy. I think this is really important and will help also, you know, in the it's a confidence-building measures. That mean if each country has a national cybersecurity, then you understand much better, what are the special national priorities and, what the situation in this country. That's why also in the program of action, which is under discussion in the open-ended working group in the United Nations, there is the recommendation to elaborate national strategies. But it would be absolutely needed that such national strategies are coming out, from a multi-stakeholder discussion in a country. So that means if only, governmental people are sitting together and draft such a document, so certainly they can produce a good document, but they would miss some points, and the decision-making capacity remains in the hand of governments. But all the wisdom and knowledge which could come from the technical sector, from the private companies, from civil society are needed. And insofar, the looking forward, what will happen in the next years, I think we are moving towards a crossroads where the multi-stakeholder model, which was adopted 15, 20 years ago, will see a stress test. Because, if you look around, there are some governments which say, why I should consult, with private sector. So I have the power and I'm not ready to share this with others. Sharing is a key word in the Tunis agenda if it comes to the governance system. Insofar, it's difficult to make any predictions. The discussion on the Global Digital Compact, which was kickstarted also today by the Tech Envoy, I think is a good opportunity. Though my concrete proposal would be that the process could be stimulated by the creation of multi-stakeholder drafting teams which work on certain texts. The final decision-making capacity will remain in the hands of the government because it's an intergovernmental body, no doubt about this. But before you come to the final stage, there is a lot of things to do, and I think that's why the awareness, in particular in the field of cybersecurity within governments, is important that they understand this and make use of this potential which is available in each country and where countries can learn from each other. Back to you. Thank you very much, Olga.
Thank you very much, Wolfgang. This awareness issue, I think I've been reading and learning new things now in my role in cybersecurity, and I think that the awareness is one of the key issues that especially the government can have in hand. And I take note of what you said, a non-state actors advisory committee. I think that's a very interesting concept. Maybe we can think about some countries that have that in their structure. I don't see the government not interacting with the private sector, with the technical community, with the companies providing the technology, especially in developing countries that we are mainly buyers and users of technology developed in other countries. So thank you very much for your comments, and maybe I come back with other questions in a while. Roberto, over to you.
Thank you, Olga. And it's important to mention that indeed most of our countries usually work separated in the different agendas, the private sector by themselves, the government by themselves, and it's important, as you mentioned, Wolfgang, to tackle this issue in a very integrated and holistic way, sharing and collaborating between institutions. And I would like to know, and we are going to Regine with this question now, I would like to know, Regine, how is the IT security in the public administration organized in Germany, and how this organizational structure interact with other ministries, inside, of course, at a national level, and also outside with the other countries in the European Union context?
Thank you for that question. That sounds very easy, but it's actually very difficult to answer. The German cybersecurity architecture is often compared to, these pictures in children's books where you have a jungle with many trees and flowers and plants and animals and multicolored and very irritating and confusing. And now, where has the little mouse hidden? So, I will start with the three layers that I see, and they mirror basically what Wolfgang Kleinwächter explained from the global perspective. So first, we have a whole-of-government approach, which means that there is a core triangle of three ministries carrying the major burden of cybersecurity in Germany. That is the Ministry of Interior, that is responsible both for all the resilience work that has to be done, but also for cybercrime. Then there is the Ministry of Defense, responsible for military defense, and in our case this means not only defense of national territory, but also within our military alliance, which is NATO. And then there is the diplomacy part, which is actually my part in the foreign ministry, focusing especially on the international norms frameworks and on our bilateral relations, also in order to counter the threats that we are facing. So that's the whole of government approach. We have a national cybersecurity strategy, which describes the tasks and responsibilities for each and every part of the public administration. But the strategy describes also the second level, which is a whole of society approach. So we include not only the regions, you know that Germany is a federal system, so we have a state level responsibility and a regional level responsibility, but also the tech sector, the telecom providers, critical infrastructure providers, academia, civil society actors, and so on. And by this, it mirrors somehow the multi-stakeholder approach that we have on the global level. The third layer is, of course, the German cybersecurity strategy is embedded in an EU framework for every one of the 3 points of this triangle. So we have, for resilience, we have a Network and Information Security Directive on the EU level, which gives us directions of what to do on the national level. Then for the defense, we have an EU cyber defense posture, which is currently under discussions to reach the next level. And for diplomacy, we have an EU cybersecurity strategy, which also describes some tasks that we do jointly, like capacity building, and I'm happy to see Lina on the call. But let me tell you also something about our challenges that we are facing. It was mentioned already briefly that this multi-level and multi-perspective approach to cybersecurity means often for governments this feeling of a loss of control, because there are so many actors and the government is somehow not even in the avant-garde position to really steer the process. That's also in our case. And the second one, and this is part of it, is that the technology is developing at such a speed that it's really difficult for state actors, for national actors to be really able to grasp what this means also in terms of national security. And there's often the feeling that whatever the government does, it comes too late and is too little compared to the threat level that we are facing. And in Europe, this is often discussed under the headline of digital sovereignty. So cybersecurity questions and ownership of digital technologies come together to one discussion. The third challenge, I would say, is securitization of the whole question, which means that with this very delicate balance between privacy and individual rights and the digital rights approach to digitization on the one hand, and freedom in the discussion, and on the other hand, security in the discussion. Events like, for example, at the moment, the ransomware pandemic that we are facing in Germany, and I think in other countries too, all over the world, lead our security actors to this sentiment that they have to get more competencies in order to combat this pandemic. But then what happens to the other side of the balance? That is really something that is very challenging. And also here, I think that only within a multi-stakeholder discussion, we will be able to reach a consensus that is really sustainable also in the future. And then this leads to the fourth challenge, and this is, of course, disinformation. And I must clearly say that in our system, we separate clearly our measures, our campaigns against disinformation from the cybersecurity discussion. So disinformation is a problem, is regarded as a problem, but the mechanisms that deal with this are completely separate from the cybersecurity. So, for example, internet shutdowns is something that we do not use because we want to maintain the integrity of the digital ecosystem, and they rely on reliable access to internet. So our hybrid threats working group that we have within the ministries is more relying on elements like resilience of the society, fact-checking, providing good quality information from the side of the government so that, for example, in the pandemic, people are able to access good quality information on reliable sites and so on. So that's
Media
it.
literacy,
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting, particularly to know that it's totally feasible to have an approach of multi-stakeholderism. And it's very important as very proved experience to some other countries. But I would like to go to Olga now, because I think we have important comments.
Thank you, Roberto,
from another
and
colleague.
thank you very much, Regine. And maybe if we have time after the first round of questions, I would like you to, if you can give us more detail about this second level group that you explained, the regions, federal system related with the technical sector, how is it related with the government, but I will leave this question for the second round if we hope that we have time. Now I would like to welcome and make a question to Lina, the chief in Estonia, and I would like to commend all the work that EU Cybernet is doing. And by the way, one of my team members was in a meeting 1 or 2 weeks ago in Santo Domingo. She was very happy, and she said it was a fantastic meeting that you organized there. And thank you very much for that and for inviting her. So EU Cybernet has a very important role in creating a network of expertise to support practical learning and strengthen cybersecurity globally. And now I'm happy to see that you're working intensively in Latin America. Which are the main challenges for creating this network, especially considering these comments that we just listened about, the being multi-stakeholder, the challenge of governments interacting with the technical community and companies, and to be able to deliver this practical learning that it's useful for the attendees. And can you share with us some examples of concrete outcomes and impacts, and welcome, and thank you for being with us this morning for me.
Thank you very much, Olga. It's indeed a pleasure to join this interesting discussion, and very warm greetings from wintry Estonia. So quite a contrast to Addis or Argentina. It's snowing here at the moment. Um, so indeed, EU SciNet project was created 3 years ago with the aim of improving the quality of cyber capacity building delivered by the European Union, and also to improve access to the experts that have the skills and capacities to deliver cyber security or cyber crime related capacity building in an impactful manner. And our project's focus is on raising awareness and growing the number of experts who would be interested to be to share their experiences with EU partner countries across the globe, and to share their experiences through different consultations, trainings, and exercises. And we make this network website available to EU institutions, to projects, to EU member states who engage in different cyber activities. And European Union is the largest development aid provider in the world, accounting for more than half of the all development aid in the world, and is also a very active player, donor and implementer in digitalization and connectivity projects. And EU Cybernet is trying to support these efforts in trying to raise cybersecurity awareness in the donor as well as in the beneficiary. And when the donors are delivering or the beneficiaries are receiving aid in the digitalization or digital transformation space as well, we are doing several capacity building projects, and our current focus is indeed in Latin America and Caribbean region. And the EU, when speaking about the network, the EU is a family of 27 nations, very diverse, countries, but we are all joined by the same vision for global, inclusive, free, and open cybersecurity. And this is what we try to convey through the project. The experts in our network, we currently have the experts that we are trying to double. They have very diverse backgrounds, and this is what it makes it interesting, because when we deliver the trainings, we can combine the expertise from smaller and larger countries, from different maturity levels, national administrations, public sector, private sector, academia, civil society, and so combining these different approaches. I understand that my audio is not.
It's a little bit scattered. I think if you speak closer to the mic, I think that would be.
Let's try.
I can hear you, but it's not that clear. Oh, that would be great. Thank you.
I will try to hold my mic. Let me know if it's still cutting. So basically, we were trying to combine the experiences from the 27 member states of the European Union, and also experts from the regions. We are also engaging with experts in the Latin American region, for example, with whom we have been working together for years, and share the same values and exceptional professionals, because we know that copy paste or one size fits all does not work in cybersecurity at all. And this is the practical learning through examples, through stories, through lessons, good and bad practices, exercises, case studies. EU Cybernet. I'm from Estonia, and EU Cybernet is implemented by a public sector agency. It's Estonian Information System Authority, the National Cybersecurity Agency, basically. And it has a specific reason to encourage government-to-government knowledge share. And obviously, in our network, we have public sector. We don't have only public sector experts, also from private sector, from academia, elsewhere. But we try to encourage public sector involvement specifically because we might have great consultants who master the theory, the methodology, and can present it extremely well, but they may not have worked in a CSIRT or in a ministry who needs to implement cybersecurity policy, and they don't know the struggles or the frustration of operating under scarce resources or political ignorance. And therefore, it is good to combine the different sides of the story, and this is also in a way how you enhance practical knowledge. And it does not happen through PowerPoints, obviously, but by networking. Cybernet is all about networking, building bridges of practical collaboration and information exchange between CSIRTs in the recipient countries and the CSIRTs in Europe, by creating longer-term mentoring schemes, facilitating some professional internships, because these are the most effective methods to learn on-the-job training. As much as we can do that, obviously, because of resource constraints and time constraints. Regarding the challenges, I guess when designing the trainings or selecting experts, we have to take into account the impact that it will make, and always have in mind the absorption capacity in the recipient country, because the outcome should be something that the recipient country is happy about, and where they have also invested their resources, their time, their efforts. They should feel that they are part of that collective brain who created that outcome, because if this is not the case, then the work will be forgotten quickly, and the policies that have been drafted and even adopted will be never implemented. So that capacity building needs to drive change and change happens through effort, and sometimes that effort is painful and it includes frustration as well. So this is how we intend to, or how we try to focus on sharing by sharing experiences, very practical experiences through the network that we have created.
Thank you very much, Lina. 27 nations and same vision. That's a very strong idea to have in mind and to work with. So I commend you for that. And this adoption capacity, I think that's important. Sometimes we see that some technologies are adopted and used, but sometimes not necessarily adopted in the right way. So I think this is a very interesting comment, and I will come back with some question after the first round that I have in mind. Now I will give the floor to Roberto again.
Thank you, Olga. Now we will go to our region, to the LAC region actually, and we have with us to Cesar, and I would like to address him regarding the cybernet effort that was established in Santo Domingo in Dominican Republic. And in this matter, how do you see the region in its way to digital transformation, and which are the main challenges that you think our region has to face in the near future?
Well,
Cesar,
thank
you
you
have the
very much.
floor.
Yes, thank you very much for that, Roberto. Thank you, Olga, as well, and good morning and good afternoon to all. I guess the Latin American region is called to, I guess, face great challenges to achieve this necessary digital transformation or to develop this digital ecosystem. You know, we need, I guess, we've made advancement when it comes to the coverage of telecommunications networks and services. We've advanced in legal frameworks. We've, had lots of projects and initiatives when it comes to social inclusion programs, and even in electronic government. But the unquestionable fact is that we, as a region, we are still lagging behind quite a lot. And I guess, to round up, or at least to answer your question, Roberto, I would try to narrow it down to 5 big areas. And I guess number 1 obviously comes down to infrastructure. In this context, the promotion, I guess, of proactive public policies is required that, for example, will allow, I guess, the deployment of, of broadband services, both at a national level and at a regional level. This is something that we're still, as a region, when you look at statistics from, organizations such as ITU, you see that even though through the pandemic, there was a considerable growth, in the use of telecom services, the region as a whole is still lagging behind when we compare us to other regions as well. The second challenge, I guess, is digital economy. And obviously, this is something that even though there has been quite a lot of access to, small, medium enterprises, to the internet, it has increased, even before the pandemic, after the pandemic, way more. This, however, has not been translated into a reduction of the productivity gap between companies. For example, you see small, medium enterprises that do have access to technology, do have access to the internet, but however, this has not translated into more economic welfare for some of these companies as well. Thirdly, there is the issue of electronic government. Electronic government has become, a core entity for digital transformation, which is why we, I guess, as a society must advocate to promote, more action in this arena. However, it is worth noting that, after more than a decade, I think, or even more than that, there have been constant meetings, constant commitments, saying we need to improve e-government. But the reality is that when you look at e-government indexes and such, you realize that probably only about 4 or 5 countries in the Latin American Caribbean are among the top 50 places in the world. So again, lots of area for opportunity. The fourth, I guess, challenge that I would have to find is basically when the challenges that stem from social inclusion and sustainable development. Obviously, encouraging the incorporation of ICTs in social spheres is essential to create an inclusive society. We must now, to include, we must focus on vulnerable social groups, so this must be a priority when we're thinking about IT policies. And at the regional level, the goals of ICT policies, should be to influence education, developing better student and teacher competencies. For example, when it comes to health services, obviously, improving the efficiency of the provision of these services. And last but not least, always take care of the environment, and the use of ICTs for protection of the environment must also be one to that we must not leave behind. And last but not least, obviously, my favorite topic of all, cyber capacity building. And it's true that national efforts in cybersecurity must be reinforced by our competent authorities. Olga was giving the perspective of Argentina, which I think is a really good example. We have Carrie Ann on the panel, which probably will tell us about the efforts that the OAS is doing in promoting the development of national cybersecurity strategies, of the creation of CSIRTs. And this is a step in the right direction, but we have to understand that we need, if we are ever more dependent on these technologies, and these technologies do carry a certain type of risks. So if the only way that we can actually, fend off some of these risks is obviously with cyber capacity building, having, for example, and basically having enough preparedness, enough resilience that when these attacks happen, we know what to do. We have the corrective measures in place, and this can only be done through cyber capacity building.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Cesar.
you very much. Go ahead, Olga.
No, maybe you want to comment something, Roberto? I just had a follow-up question, maybe for later.
No, don't worry. We will continue following up later in our second round. Due to the time, please go ahead.
Thank you, Cesar. And I know that you are in another meeting, so I value very much that you take the time for being in this panel. Now I would like to give the floor and make a question to my dear friend Carrie Ann Barrett from the Organization of American States. And we all know, especially in the Americas, the great work done by the Organization of American States through CICTE, the cybersecurity program that has a major role in helping all countries of the Americas in defining national cybersecurity strategies, capacity building, and perhaps having this glue that European Union has, and we in Latin America, we have the Organization of American States, so they have this place for all of us to interact. So what else, Carrie Ann, needs to be done at the national and regional level to build upon this strategy and enhance the cybersecurity of each national administration, so that national cybersecurity doesn't end being a paper that everyone likes, but nothing happens? And how can member states begin to prioritize the necessary governance structures? We have heard some ideas from Regine in Germany and the European Union, from Lina. How can these structures be enhanced and for sustainable national capacities? And thank you very much for being with us, and welcome.
Thanks so much, Olga, and thanks everyone for all the comments. I think they've been really, I think they built on each other. I think I wanted to take 3 different perspectives and identify some of the best practices from those situations. So the first one would follow up on Wolfgang's example of the multi-stakeholder group that could be established at the national level for the development of strategies. So like as a best practice within the OAS, we always ensure that our member states establish either an interministerial group or at a minimum, a multi-stakeholder group that actually involves private sector and academia when they're consulting to develop the strategy. One of the reasons why we think that this is a good example is because even within government itself, there are silos. And the silos is because one person might be working on a digital strategy, another one on public administration, another one on improving e-services for transportation. And those silos ends up causing there to be a disconnect between digital projects at the national level. Therefore, you end up with multiple contractors, you end up with multiple service level agreements, you end up with multiple standards for security. So one of the first things that that interministerial group does, it allows all the ministries to actually hear from each other what the digital projects they're working on. As a further step in that process, the OAS is able to use its capacity, its convening capacity, to pull together all the stakeholders at the national level. So even if they're not part of the interministerial group, all stakeholders, private sector, academia are able to have a roundtable discussion both during the brainstorming side of developing a national strategy and then at the implementation side in terms of building out the plan. What are some of the downsides to that? And I'll go to the opposite end to what Wolfgang said, because Wolfgang's comments stuck with me when he said that governments are usually afraid of private sector. That's just me paraphrasing Wolfgang. But one of the cool things is that private sector are actually very interested in working with government during those working group sessions. And it always fascinates us that they always wonder why haven't they heard from the government after the strategy has been approved, because there's a continued interest to support the government in implementing the strategy. This brings me to my second example, which is a initiative we've been doing with Cisco for the past few years, and it's called the Cybersecurity Innovation Councils. We have executed this in Chile, Mexico, Colombia, and we're hoping to add other countries to this, like Costa Rica, for example. And the whole idea of this is bringing together private sector, academia, and the government in a room to discuss brainstorming what are the national challenges and what are some of the solutions. One of the amazing things through that process is that the OAS recognizes the need to have all of these groups as a part of, as you said, establishing that governance framework for national administration. And the private sector, hearing the needs of the government, can then continue to support them. So one of the main things that came out of those CICs for the past 3 years, Olga, goes to Cesar's point in terms of capacity building. Workforce development has come out as a very key need nationally. And we as the OAS with some of our partners have been speaking as to how can we then provide that framework for workforce development, not just looking at the NICE framework, which many of us know, but how can we regionalize this? So as another example to that is we've been working with FIU on what's called the Regional Initiative for Cyber Education and Training. We had our second virtual session this year, and we tried to just talk about workforce development holistically. We believe that conversations like that will support government's national administration because they'll begin to see the gaps and the needs they have in digital skills and start to develop frameworks to be able to fill those gaps. I think my last major example I'd want to share with everyone is the need for more research in our region. It's something that always gets me that as a region, in order for our national administrations or governments to start thinking about cybersecurity holistically, research is needed. We need to bring academia into the room. We need to make sure that we're taking their research and using it. And even at the OAS's level, we produce white papers, we produce publications, but I want to use this word, and I know I'm in like in a public setting, but dumbing it down to the point where you can actually absorb the information is also critical. Ensuring that we're not just pushing research that is just good for paper and it sounds good for academia, but also it's absorbable by governments, recognizing that we have to have executive level points coming out of that. So an example of that that we've done recently was with a civil society partner, Global Partners Digital. We published a good practice guide on national cybersecurity strategy development, and we saw it as complementary to the ITU guide because ITU's guide that speaks to strategy development takes you step by step. And we even shared our documents with them as a part of that multi-stakeholder collaboration and said to them, this is our publication to complement yours. And the reason we shared it with them is because what we try to do in that document is in the Americas, we now have 17 national cybersecurity strategies. We believe that our region has a lot to share with the world in terms of the experiences. So in that document, we gave case studies. We asked each of our member states, example in Colombia, who actually worked with civil society to do their strategy, what were some of the best practices with that? We spoke to civil society and asked them to give feedback. How was that experience with you working with the government to develop the strategy? So we recommend if anyone hasn't read it, it's a good case to read because it actually gives two practical examples. So I think to summarize, Olga, national administration can only be improved through that multi-stakeholder model, because at the end of the day, cybersecurity affects us all differently. The government's perspective in terms of creating the ecosystem, the private sector in terms of creating the technology, and then the end users, the citizens, in terms of us being the observers of technology, needs to have different levels of knowledge, different levels of information available to us. And I believe that our national administration can only be improved through that. So I'll have back over to you and Roberta. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Carrie-Ann. And again, I commend you for all the work that the Organization of American States does. You said something very interesting. People that has not worked with governments or within a government think that governments are monolithic. That's far from reality. We have silos, we have different views and different ministries and different agencies within government that have different perspectives, especially in relation with cybersecurity. And I also think that the work that the Organization of American States does within companies, with private sector, helps governments to be closer and interact and lose this fear to work with private sector, because there is also this a geopolitical dimension of technology with the private sector that it sometimes for government means something. We have sometimes for a second round of questions, perhaps shorter. I have some, I don't know if Roberto, you have some also ideas. I have a question for Wolfgang, if he's still with us. I know he's very busy and sometimes he may have to go to another meeting. I know. You said that a good idea could be having a non-state actors advisory committee. Do we know, I can think of CGI from Brazil, that they have a very interesting multi-stakeholder model. Do we know about other countries having this kind of non-state actors advisory community committee interacting with governments?
I think this is certainly different from country to country. Regina has mentioned the case in Germany with the various circles, the intergovernmental circle, then the outside consultation, and the CGIBR case is a special case, and without CGIBR, the Net Mundial conference never would have taken place because they have this advanced multi-stakeholder model at home. What I wanted to add also as a reaction to the discussion here, I think there is no need to reinvent the wheel, because each country is confronted with the same situation, and you can compare it to climate change. Climate change is a very global issue. All countries are confronted, but you know, the protection of climate starts at home, and you have to look what you can do, but you can learn from each other. So you know, and you have to adjust then the global experiences to your national concrete situation, to your national priorities. But this goes hand in hand. So in the academic world, we have years ago introduced this terminology, localization. So that means the global issues, you know, need a local answer to that. And I think for cybersecurity, this is exactly the case. So because the weakest part in the global internet ecosystem is a risk for the security of everybody. And insofar, to learn from each other, you know, exchange of best practices is a cheap investment, and capacity building is important. That's why in the United Nations, the program of action is the real way forward, and not to introduce new norms and treaties in this field. Probably in cybercrime, it's a special case, and ransomware is a new challenge. But I would think, you know, think global but act local. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wolfgang. Yeah, localization, but at the same time, we are all connected. So it's really very challenging. Regina, you mentioned that you have a tech sector interacting with regions. is that a formal committee? How is the formality of this group with the interaction of the federal government or the regions?
The format for this kind of interaction is a National Cybersecurity Council, which consists of the federal government institutions that I mentioned, so Ministry of Interior, Foreign Affairs, Defense, Justice, and so on, but also representatives of the regional level and of the private sector and civil society. And they actually have an agenda that contains all the issues where we have joint but perhaps not the same interests. So we have the same issues on the agenda, but different views on that. For example, the question of innovation and research. Who is actually responsible for that? We have a state-financed university system in Germany, but we have a lot of research also going on financed by the private sector. So this has to combine somehow to make sense. Then the question of skilled workforce. We need a lot more of IT experts. So who is actually responsible for educating these experts? Is it schools and public sector training institutions, or is it the private sector? Because we have a dual education system in Germany. Critical infrastructure, the other thing. So we have critical infrastructure providers that are private. We have those that are public. Many of those are not even on the federal level, but on the regional level or district level or municipality level. So again, a challenge of how to bring them all to the point where they take this burden of taking the responsibility of providing minimum standards for the security of their service. And certification is another use case of the National Cybersecurity Council, because certification, of course, helps the consumers because they know that the product they buy is secure. We have our cybersecurity agency testing the products and working also with private testing entities to kind of label products, but we have on the other hand also the private sector, which is interested in getting those labels in order to have a better, argument in marketing their products.
Thank you, Regina. So this National Cybersecurity Council is really a multi-stakeholder body interacting with the government, as far as I can understand.
Yes, that's the case.
Thank you. And you mentioned disinformation. Is that something considered as an issue of cybersecurity in part of these activities that you mentioned? So this is part of the cybersecurity issue, or more on?
No, it's not. No, it's not. We don't regard it as a cybersecurity issue. We have other fora to discuss this, and we rely more on the resilience of the society and on regulation of companies than on state activities in this sector.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Regina. Roberto, do you have some other question in mind? I have some others, but maybe you want to chime in.
I have some as well. Maybe to elaborate a little bit more about the approach that the states have when they have to provide inputs. They use the same kind of framework for all over the regions, or they just manage their own approach and then they provide inputs for the national level.
Of course, for the private sector, the minimum requirements that are issued by the governments create or should create a level playing field for everybody. That's why, because we have an internal market in the European Union, we have also tasked the European Union with setting up some minimum requirements for cybersecurity, both in terms of products, so Internet of Things products, devices that can go online. That's work in progress at the moment, but for example, critical infrastructures, we have these minimum requirements for quite a while and are updating them at the moment in order to match them to the actual threat situation that we face. So the level playing field argument is very important.
Thank you. And then I have another question, a following question, Olga, for Cesar. Maybe we can go with him for a while.
Yeah.
And Cesar, if you are still with us, I wanted to. We know that Indotel, as the regulator for office for Dominican Republic, has an important, a major role regarding universal access, and that's one of the things that you mentioned in your intervention before, which of course is very important to aim this digital transformation in your country. How do you see the strategies that may be effective in the near future in order to overcome this kind of situation? Because, as you said before, we do have several divides in our region, not only between our region and the rest of the world, particularly the global north, but inside our region. And for sure, as it happens in in our different countries, you do have this kind of divides inside Dominican Republic. How do you face that as the regulator?
Oof, well, that is really the million-dollar question. And had I known you were going to go there, Roberto, I would have really prepared a completely different participation. But I will answer it to the best of my ability. Number one, and I think obviously this has come, I guess, over. Wolfgang mentioned it, Carrie Ann mentioned it, Lena mentioned it, Regine has also mentioned it, and it's, I guess, when it comes to, I guess, this multi-stakeholder system of approaching some of the challenges that I guess the digital transformation and the internet as a whole brings for us. For example, I can give you some very local examples of projects that we've done in Dominican Republic, trying to basically close some of these divides that you mentioned. For example, we've done quite a lot of alliances with the private sector in order to get, telecom services, in order to get broadband, in order to get internet services to those communities where we honestly know that no provider in their right mind is ever going to go there. So we've managed to make quite a lot of advancement in the last few years, especially during the pandemic, and obviously now after the pandemic, we've made quite a lot of advancement in having lots of liaisons with the private sector. Additionally to that, there's obviously civil society, and one of the main projects that I'm really that I do have to highlight is that there has been certain approaches to the regulator, to NGOs that deal in this type of issue, that are trying to get communities connected online in order to close some of those gaps, in order to try to get connectivity to the people that need it the most. Obviously, this is, I guess, it is not all, roses and perfume. There is a lot of negotiation that has to go on. There's a lot of interest on the table from governments, from private sector, even from civil societies and the communities that this touches upon. So I guess my advice in this regard would be, yes, do try to get everyone on board. Do never forget that the ultimate goal for this is obviously getting people online, but not necessarily just getting them online for the sake of getting them online, but also getting them online to have, I guess, the internet be this enabler for their transformation, for their inclusion, and obviously for the economic benefits that they can reap out of this.
Thank you,
Thank you very much,
Cesar.
Cesar.
1 minute for Lina and 1 minute for Carrie Ann. Lina, I see that the basis of your work is the European Union, but I see that you are doing activities in Latin America, which is very good. Which other regions are you working with apart from Latin America and European Union?
1 minute. We are a global project. We
Okay.
started from Latin America, and LAC4 is the first European Union funded regional cyber competence center, which is also a complement for the region. There's lots of potential to advance, to, I guess, harmonize the security levels, cross-border collaboration. I guess this is why has invested a lot of attention in Latin America specifically. Of course, EU has other priority regions which are geographically closer to the EU. But this is a very, I guess, concise approach to support Latin America. But we have bits and pieces also in Asia, but we that's massively right now Latin America, because EU actually has a lot of different cyber capacity projects in addition to CyberNet. There's CyberDev, Plus, CyberDirect, and Pacto. So they do quite a lot of work all across the globe, I would say, and EU cyber steps in these segments where no other project is currently delivering, on tailor-made projects and activities that where there is a need. We try to operate in the needs-based formula on delivering something that we have in a to each say client or target country in.
Thank you very much, Lina. I think that Karian has no audio, so
I just got my audio back. So
oh, you're back.
if you
Okay.
still need me, still
Thank you. Final
just got it
comments
back.
for. Thank you. Thank you. One question about what you mentioned about research. How can you think that we could enhance the research idea within universities? How can is the Organization of American States doing something in that regard? I think that's a very we have lack of research in Latin America about cybersecurity. I agree with you.
One of the things that we're looking into for 2023 is actually to increase our research in certain topics. So for example, with the gender and cybersecurity, we'll be doing more specific research by outreach into universities. We also learned recently of a network of researchers that was launched out of Brazil with IGF. So we're thinking of ways in which we can start to reach out to those various networks and collaborate with them to actually do topical issues that are happening in LATAM, and then use our platform to be able to publish and bring more visibility to those works. So as like one example, we learned recently of a researcher that did some work on workforce development with ITU, and we reached out to ITU to see if we could do a joint publication with them on that research, because we recognize that there's need to be able to use our platform to cause the work that researchers are doing. And I think it's to bring them in the room more often as well when we have the consultations for strategy. So that would be probably just some next steps, Olga, that we could probably highlight.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Kirian. We are totally out of time. I keep 2 or 3 big ideas, enhance the multi-stakeholder activities, capacity building, and work together, private sector, governments, and academia and technical community. Thank you all very much for being with us today. Thank you, Wolfgang. Thank you, Roberto. Thank you, Regina. Thank you, Lina. Cesar, thank you very much. Kirian and Monica, thank you, the audience, also for being with us. And with that, I send you my best regards from Buenos Aires. Thank you very much. Have a great day and have a great IGF for those of you there.
Thank you very much, Olga. Thank
Bye.
you. Thank
Gracias,
you, everyone.
Roberto. Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And we now close the session. Thank you.